You're listening to Player Development, a channel focused on the intersection of sports and character growth. Please like and subscribe to support the stories being shared, the growth of our listeners, and to stay up to date with our latest content. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video on our relationship with sports, whether we're treating it as entertainment or escape. We're going to diverge a little bit from our relationship as consumers today to be talking about what's been going on with Aaron Rodgers and the COVID protocols. Now, I know we've been through the COVID well with athletes a bunch of times now, and it's probably getting pretty old, and honestly, I'm pretty tired of talking about it too. But I think this highlights a really important dynamic that we might think of when we're talking about leadership and character in sports and athletes. So basically, the quick summary is that Aaron Rodgers recently tested positive for COVID, and I think he was actually diagnosed with a disease. And it came out that he was not vaccinated, which doesn't have to be a problem. But he had been acting in accordance with the NFL's rules for players who are vaccinated. So even though he was not vaccinated, he acted as if he were vaccinated, such as traveling with the team to away games, and holding indoor press conferences without being masked. And he went on a talk show to defend his actions and talk about why what he did was okay. And one of the quotes that really summed it up for me, at least, was him saying that he followed all of the NFL protocols except for the ones that he didn't like. He also made a lot of statements about the validity of the science behind the vaccinations and what he is pursuing to maintain his health and protect people around him. I'm not here to get into discussions about that. I'll reserve that for people who are a lot smarter than me in the medical field and who have actually studied this stuff to be able to address those points. What I think is really important about this particular case, and I highly doubt that Aaron Rodgers is the only player who is unvaccinated but acting as if he's vaccinated, is that he is just such a high-profile player. He's the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, the reigning MVP of the league, and this really puts the team, the league, and maybe even himself in a really difficult spot. So in one article that I read about this from The Ringer, they talk about a league spokesperson who, in effect, puts the onus on the Green Bay organization to enforce the NFL's COVID protocols, which means that Rodgers' lack of adherence to those protocols means that the responsibility and the punishment will fall on the organization's shoulders. And we saw this with teams last year. I think the Raiders were one example that didn't follow COVID protocols, and the team was fined and was initially had a 6th-round draft pick revoked. And I think they got the draft pick punishment overturned on appeal eventually. And here's where the tension comes in, is that because Rodgers is such a high-profile player, he can almost get away with a lot of these decisions that he's making, even though they are blatantly going against the NFL's rules, and he is blatantly saying that his choices and his discretion is more important than the league that he plays in and plays for. So let's break that down a little bit. How does that affect his teammates? How does that affect him? And how does that affect the league? So basically the tension is that because he is so important just by nature of being the starting quarterback for his team, and also being a player of the caliber that he is an MVP, that most likely the team is not going to willingly suspend him. That would mean costing them wins as they're fighting for playoff seeding and just playoff position, and they would stand to lose a lot if they were to suspend him. And this may all change as it develops. The NFL may enforce something in its rules, or the organization might itself enforce something. But especially after his trade request, of trade demand earlier in the offseason, Rodgers has seemed to really been dangling the Green Bay organization based on what he wants to do and not necessarily what would serve his teammates or serve his team. And so I think the contrast needs to be thought about is if this were another player, say the last guy off the bench in an organization, would any team think twice about just cutting him to save themselves the headache, or fining them, or just doing whatever they needed to enforce the rules, compared to possibly the most important guy on your team, that he gets to do almost whatever he thinks is best for himself instead of considering what might be best for the team. And so this speaks to leadership also. Now, I'm not in Rodgers' head. I don't know exactly what he's thinking or how he's perceiving this as a leader, as a player, as an individual. But I would imagine that if I were another player on that team, and this is a guy who is supposed to be our leader on the field, the most important guy on the team, potentially costing us wins, potentially costing locker room dynamic where he thinks where it seems like he thinks he's more important than any of the rest of us because it's only his choice that matters. I think that COVID has really put the onus on all of us as individuals to measure our own sense of individuality and our sense of choice and freedom for what we do with our bodies, medically and otherwise, versus how our choices might impact other people. I don't think there's going to be an easy resolution to this because of Rodgers' status as such an important player and such a high-profile player, that the NFL might have difficulty figuring out what to do, because any choices that they make may adversely affect a significant organization and a significant market. The organization might have its hands tied because of how important Rodgers is to their success. And Rodgers finds himself in a tough spot in the court of public opinion as well. So this might not get resolved easily, and I don't claim to have any easy answers. But as athletes, especially for those in team sports, I think this is a lesson for all of us, not even just in COVID, but in thinking if we do strive to be leaders, we don't consider just how our actions impact ourselves, but also how it affects the morale of our teammates and how our leadership is portrayed and how our decisions impact the success of the team that we say that we're committed to.